Welcome, Advisor Roadmap virtual training platform members, to another conversation with an expert who can help you get better results. Joyce Marter is the author of The Financial Mindset Fix, a mental fitness program for an abundant life. She's a licensed psychotherapist, successful entrepreneur, an author, and a mental health thought leader. She has inspired millions to improve their mental health, their financial health, their work-life balance, and relationships with proven strategies and innovative tools from psychology. Welcome, Joyce.
Thank you so much for having me, Bill. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I haven't read your book from cover to cover, but I've been diving into it substantially, and I'm going to kind of hijack your expertise to help a particular subset of our members. It's a pretty big subset who could use some improvement in this area. So everyone joins our Advisor Roadmap community. They always have the best of intentions, right? They're sincere, they're committed, they have a goal to build an ideal business with ideal clients and create their ideal lives. Of course, they have to fork over some of their hard-earned cash because they really want to get results. They want to learn the methods. And then sometimes, for reasons they can't explain, some of our members do not do as much as they intended to do. They don't make as many calls, they don't schedule as many appointments, they don't conduct as many financial roadmap interviews. Therefore, they're moving slower than they really want to. So I thought, you being both a therapist and a successful entrepreneur, having built and sold a business for a significant amount of money, that with both your therapist and entrepreneurial experience, our members would get benefit from your thoughts about that. So what do you think might be some of the reasons, generally speaking, why some people fail to execute on the work that their goals require to achieve them?
Well, as service providers, we're trained in our field of expertise. So you all as financial advisors, myself as a psychotherapist, but we may not be trained in entrepreneurship or business management, marketing, and development. And so it's important to expand our learning and development in those areas. But from a psychological perspective, there are many ways that we cause self-limitation and self-sabotage in our businesses. So we all have egos as part of the human condition. And our egos sometimes house imposter syndrome and perfectionism. We have our inner saboteur in our head that might be telling us that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not experienced enough. And that causes us to shut down, causes us to have a lack of confidence, perhaps lower self-esteem. We're not comfortable marketing or putting ourselves out there. Or maybe there are aspects of our personality. Maybe we are a more introverted person or an ambivert, and we prefer to stay kind of behind the radar of the camera or social media. But having clients and growing a business often does require putting ourselves out there, whether it's on social media or by blogging or doing podcast interviews or sharing our thoughts in open spaces, which definitely can be intimidating. So I think one of the most important skills to cultivate is actually our own self-worth and self-esteem. So getting out of that negative mindset, improving our self-talk, and practicing a lot of self-compassion, and recognizing that we're all human. These aspects are challenging for each of us in business, and getting the support that we need. I know that was my biggest mistake as an entrepreneur. I did not seek proper business or marketing or financial consultation prior to starting my business, and I ended up in cash flow hell. And things on the outside looked like my business was going great, but I was suffering in silence because the larger my company got, the more money was outstanding in insurance. And this taught me an important lesson of humility and being vulnerable and turning to my colleagues, my peers, even my staff, and saying, I need help. I have messed up. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. And help came out of the woodwork. So It's a combination of honoring that we're all going to have these psychological challenges with starting a business or growing a business, but we need the support to work through them, whether it's great coach or therapist or um, group of accountability partners that are going to lift us up. And some of us have difficulty doing the work. So, we can have a positive mindset, we can have a great vision of what we want to do, but as growing a company that's going to succeed or growing it to scale or sometimes even sell requires a lot of work in areas that might not be your areas of strength or expertise. And so it requires some money in terms of hiring the right people, learning how to delegate, learning how to let go of some control so that you can focus on the things that you're really good at. Or it might involve having to do some things you don't like doing, like making cold calls, like you said, for example.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So our particular students, at least to some degree, the one of the things you mentioned is what they've done with us. They've hired us and said, we want your playbook. We want your scripts. We want your processes. We want your playbook. And this particular thing is not delegable, right? So they're not making cold calls, but they have to call their clients to schedule these meetings, and it's a meeting they haven't had before. So they have to learn a process, actually memorize a script. They have to call to schedule the meeting, learn how to run the meeting, then actually run the meeting. You would think that would be relatively easy, right? I'm going to call my own clients. They already know, like, and trust me. They're already paying me for financial advice. And for many advisors, that is the easiest part. But some even get stuck there, right? So you commented about, imposter syndrome or not being good enough is, well, my clients know me one way, and if I show up with this new thing, they're going to perceive me differently. Might that alter it? And then again, we never teach cold calling, but they do then have to, the next phase of it is to actually contact people they already know. So people who are in their database, friends, neighbors, people they already know, that tends to be more challenging for most. So given that little bit of background, I mean, this isn't going to be our entire time together. I appreciate you can't do like therapy through this avatar of a person that I am describing for you. So, what are some of your thoughts about? And I think you nailed it with just they got to do the work. I mean, there are some things you don't like to do that you can't delegate.
This is so true. And I remember in a therapy session years ago, I had a client thinking about starting her own business. And she said, what am I supposed to do? Shop at Office Depot and make cold calls and be assembling lamps for my office? And I thought, oh my gosh, I had done all those things that very morning as an entrepreneur. And we have to do the work. We have to have the drive, the ambition, the dedication, the diligence, the tenacity. And we need to set up systems of accountability. If it's something that we're procrastinating, oftentimes that is connected to perfectionism. We're not feeling prepared enough. So, sort of putting our feet to the fire, the only way that we're going to grow and expand is if we expand our comfort zones. And that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for each of us. And I have social anxiety. It's something that I've had to work tremendously hard on. When I was in graduate school, my voice shook when I was called on in class, and I have an underlying anxiety disorder. I think all of us have some mental health issues as part of the human condition. And so by working on that, I've learned skills to cope and grow, and now I'm a public speaker. So I still deal with anxiety, but we can move through it. It's like exposure therapy. And so, yeah, and sometimes we have some deeper sort of motives for self-sabotaging. Some of us, for example, if your parents never went to college and they immigrated here to give you a better life, and you're the first person in your family to graduate from college, those are unique financial stressors and pressures, and also can cause some feelings of guilt and shame for surpassing your parents. And so some of us have what's called in therapy land unconscious contracts that we're agreeing not to be the biggest and best that we can be in order to not threaten our current relationships, whether that's our parents or partner or friends.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, reaching out to people is a social component that involves potential rejection. So we need to have the skills to know that we are worthy and deserving. Our intentions are to be of service and help and to have confidence. That's really what I saw in my clinical practice that made me attracted to the psychology of money was that I noticed as my clients made progress in therapy, they started to earn more money because they had more confidence and assertiveness and they expanded their comfort zones and they were better negotiators advocating for themselves.
You mentioned accountability, and well, there are a couple of things that you mentioned that I want to just amplify because obviously I know our members extraordinarily well, and you're getting a little bit of an understanding of who they are. So I'm sort of feeling like I'm a spokesperson for them, but I know that they're surprised because I come across as very confident. And that's something I've worked on for a long time. But you mentioned, imposter syndrome, not feeling good enough. So that's actually I figured out a way to turn that into a motivator because I feel exactly that way as somebody who didn't graduate from college, where almost everybody in the financial services industry did, right? It was
Mhm.
unusual. In fact, my company had a requirement that you had to have a college degree. I worked for Merrill Lynch in order to get hired there, and I convinced them they should make an exception for me. So
Amazing.
but
Brilliant.
I still always sort of felt like, in a world where everybody has a college degree or they have a lot of designations, or, I don't come from a wealthy family. So who am I to talk to especially rich people? I wanted rich people as clients, but I didn't know a single rich person, right?
Love it.
I didn't have any I didn't have rich parents. My parents didn't have rich friends. So it was, I've always felt not good enough or not quite good enough or substantially not good enough. And so talk a little bit about, so you've got these things, you got imposter syndrome, you don't feel good enough. You've got some, what did you call that? A social contract? What was the contract?
Yes. Like an unconscious social
Right.
contract.
You've got a contract that you're making decisions by that you don't even realize you have this contract. So what are some of your thoughts? You mentioned accountability. Maybe talk a little bit more about that and your thoughts about, so how do you just do the work anyway? How do you get yourself to do what you need to do, even though all this you've got all these mental health problems?
Well, first of all, I want to applaud you on sharing vulnerably about your own feelings of imposter syndrome. And it's such a great example because obviously everyone who meets you knows that you're a highly intelligent, highly successful person, and no one's thinking about your college degree or not. So we often compare our insides to other people's outsides, and we imagine everyone else is just rocking it and doing awesome, like they're sharing on their social media. And one of the blessings of being a therapist is that I see that we all have our stuff. We all deal with whether it's depression, anxiety, substance use issues, grief and loss. We all have self-esteem issues as part of the human condition. And that's normal and natural. It's not a weakness. It's not something to be ashamed of, but it's something we can improve upon. And it's actually really important to improve upon not only for our mental health, but for our business success and our financial wealth. So, our well being, our self esteem, our confidence, all of those are precursors for succeeding in business and finance. And in order to achieve the goals, we have to break them down into manageable, smaller objectives. You and I are both in the speaker world, and I'm applying for the certified speaking professional, which is a very daunting project. So, breaking that down into smaller objectives, creating a timeline. Again, I set up systems of accountability, people to review my spreadsheet or my video, things like that to keep me on track And part of that is self-care, and tending to our dreams is self-care. If we love and care about ourselves, we're going to want our businesses to succeed and be fruitful. And we know that we're capable and deserving of that, and we have to take the steps. And so, whatever gives you drive and a sense of purpose, if you can apply that to your business, I think having a mission for your business that's really aligned with why it is that you do this work and why it's important to you can really help us as a compass for having that drive, taking care of our physical health, exercising, making sure we're seeing friends, that we lead a balanced life and that we're connected with others, refuels our battery so that we have energy to give to our work.
Yeah, I'm just going to go. I want to ask one clarifying question about accountability because you've mentioned that a couple of times. That's another thing that I've noticed that both in our world, the speaker, author, trainer, coach, consultant world, and the financial services world, those are kind of the two worlds that I live in a lot. I've definitely noticed in both of them it's sometimes remarkable the lengths that people will go through to not be accountable. So there's this kind of accountability avoidance. I know one thing that I learned in my 20s going through professional development training is that one form of accountability is to publicly state your goals. That when
Yeah.
somebody says, "Hey, what's going on?" to actually say, "This is what I'm doing." So when I was a financial advisor, I would publicly state it's my goal to be at this level of production and have this many clients. And, it's just particularly among my friends. And then there was a sort of a friendly accountability. How's that going? More recently, I started playing golf. I've made it very public. My goal is to be a golfer who breaks 80 on my worst day. I have not broken 80 yet. I've been now playing for a little over 2 years and I haven't broken 80, but my goal is to be that for 80 to be my worst score right now, or to break it. 79. My goal is for 79 to be my worst score, and I have not broken 80 even once yet. And if people, they ask me, how's that going? Well, I'm getting closer. I've almost broken 80 a lot more times now than I had when I set the goal. So I know that's one form of accountability is just to tell people and see how that works. What would you say are other good forms of accountability? And what advice would you have for someone who might be avoiding accountability? It's like, well, if I don't tell anybody my goal, then I can never
Right.
fail, right?
Right, because when we tell people our goals, we're putting it out there, and like you said, they're going to expect results and they're going to follow up with you. And so that locks us in position. So that is a great strategy. And I think telling as many people as possible that you're going to make that come to fruition. And there's a tool in psychology called acting as if. It was created
Mm.
by Alfred Adler, who is one of the founding fathers of modern psychology. And it's this notion that if we act as if, our worst score is 80 on a bad day, we start to think and behave differently. And so when, for example, my book had a lot of rejection when I was trying to get it published, I started acting as if I am the international author and speaker that I aspire to be. So I would walk around my house saying, I am an international author and speaker like my friend Brene Brown. And after a couple months of doing that, I actually landed the publisher of Brene Brown and now have an internationally published book and am doing international speaking. But it starts with us aiming high. So you set your goal really high, higher than what has been attainable at this point. And that's important because sometimes we set our benchmarks too low and we're setting self-limiting ceilings for ourselves. So we need to, in therapy, it's called the miracle question. What's the biggest, best vision that you can imagine, and aiming for that, telling people, and then also having follow-up check-in calls. So setting up a meeting, we're going to talk in a week, and I'm going to report my progress on my homework assignments or on this project or how many tasks I've completed. Or I'm going to have a group of us that mastermind together and stay on each other and help make sure that we achieve the goals. Again, having a therapist is not just about treating mental illness or being in crisis. I think having a great therapist or coach can help us follow through and not procrastinate, because it's another person that we're promising that we're going to evolve and get better. So,
Hmm.
another point that you made about responsibility that I want to mention is that as a therapist, I see a lot of us stay stuck in blame. And so, for your example, someone who grew up in a family like yours might say, well, I wasn't born rich, and so I'm not rich, I'm poor.
Hmm.
And that becomes a belief system and a self-fulfilling prophecy. But you rewrote that narrative. You came from one environment, and even without a college degree, knew that you were deserving and capable of working at Merrill Lynch and put yourself out there. You were assertive and you negotiated. And so you have achieved a tremendous amount. And so, um, in order to have that growth mindset, we have to continue to do that even when we experience rejection and failure. So even after my book was declined many, many times, I had to keep going back because that was my dream. That's part of my self-care.
Hmm. That's really insightful. And I have your book right here, of course, and I think it's interesting because the people who endorsed your book. I mean, they're impressive names of people who endorsed your book. So why do you think people they would assume that it's easier than it probably was? They don't. I don't know that they automatically go and say, "I'll bet this got a lot of rejection. I'll bet there were times where Joyce wanted to quit.
No,
I'll bet she had to." What? Why is our tendency? It's almost like our tendency is to think, well, it's harder for us, but it's easier for others.
totally. Totally. That book was years and years in the making with tons of rejection. And yeah, I had Seth Godin
Yeah.
endorse it even. And
Stephen
so,
M.R. Covey, who is
yes,
Dr. Stephen Covey's son.
yes.
So I don't know the two in the middle, but yeah, to be, sandwiched with Stephen M.R. Covey and Seth Godin, those are not small endorsements for, a book that got all this rejection.
Thank you. And it's won 8 book awards, been in 6 global festivals, and published in 4 languages. And I think what is helpful about the book, it's a step-by-step program with journaling prompts and exercises and self-assessment tools that are in each area or mindset that I identified leads to improved mental health and financial wealth. And it's
Mhm.
empirically supported that as we develop those skills and those mindsets, that we expand our lives uh, in terms of our well-being, our relationships, and our finances. And so I really consider it my purpose and passion to remove the shame and stigma around mental health and financial stress and provide people with practical tools to heal, recover, thrive, and prosper. What I've been pleasantly surprised by is that the book has opened doors for me to speak in the financial industries. And I've had, for example, I spoke for the CFO Leadership Council to a large group of hundreds of CFOs. And although they're financial experts, they hadn't really looked at their psychology of money, at
Mhm.
their family of origin and cultural belief systems around money, the messages about money that were talked about at the dinner table growing up, and how they shaped their own money story, perhaps even why they came into the profession. Looking at their intergenerational financial trauma or their own scarcity mindset or money anxiety, and how that might shape their own work with their advising. There's always room for us to grow and develop. And by the way, I think we therapists, we specialize in our own issues. And I've had tremendous financial anxiety, as I mentioned, when my business was in cash flow hell, and dealt with insomnia and panic attacks. And help is available. We can heal, we can recover, we can save our businesses, we can grow our businesses beyond our wildest dreams. And I want to help people do that.
Well, you are. You're helping a lot of people, and you're helping us today. One of the statements that I pulled as I was preparing for our time together today is something that you said. I think I don't know if it was on your website or in your background information, but according to the American Psychological Association, finances and the economy are top stressors for Americans, negatively impacting mental health. So in your book, The Financial Mindset Fix, you describe 12 mindsets that are empirically proven to improve both mental and financial health. And not just financial wealth, but a life of abundance, including connected and supported relationships and inner peace. So, in the limited time we have together, it's probably a big ask to get you to unpack all 12 of these. And I know many of our members will want to get a copy of your book so they can go deeper. But where do you think would be the best place to start?
Well, it would be reflecting on your own thoughts and beliefs about money, going back to your family of origin. The first chapter of the book is on having an abundance mindset. And during times of economic uncertainty, like we're experiencing now, many of us develop a scarcity mindset around money that's fear-based and rooted in lack, that there's only so much of the pieces of the pie to go around. And if I have a bigger piece of the pie, that means there's less than you or less for you.
Mhm.
And an abundant mindset is the idea that resources can regenerate, that they're plentiful, they're perhaps even never ending, that we can be innovators, we can be problem solvers, we can collaborate rather than being fearful and competitive and evolve together. And so whenever we have scarcity mindset, that leads to fear and self-limitation. So that's an important mindset for sure, is abundance. Another is presence. I'm sure many of us are familiar with mindfulness and all of the amazing research that shows that meditation and mindfulness practices improve everything from our immune system to our mental health to our financial wealth. And so, if we can apply mindfulness to money, so getting out of our head and into our heart and our gut and the wisdom of our body, connecting with our senses, being present instead of ruminating about the past or worrying about the future, is going to help us develop equanimity, which is mental calmness to make financially conscious decisions rather than emotionally reactive decisions. One thing that I thought was really interesting when I had my book tour in New York City, I was with William Green, who wrote Richer, Happier, Wiser. I tend to switch those around, but it's those three words in some order. And
Mhm.
his book, he interviewed the billionaires of the world to find out what common traits they all had. And he had like 8 or 10 traits. And those were the same 8 or 10 traits that I identified in my therapy clients that made them financially successful. So I think they're universal truths. They also include self-love, support, resilience, positivity, vision, and
Mhm.
more.
Beautiful. So, what are your thoughts about someone who maybe is, we call it being stuck in the mediocre middle? They're so busy serving their smaller clients that they don't feel like they have time to actually just go get their fair share. So, do you have any thoughts about that? About what might be, holding them back, or what might you could do to give them a little accelerant?
Well, some people are mission driven and want to be of service to people who are earning a lower income or aren't at that $1 million mark. And that's certainly meaningful. And I can identify with that as a therapist. And my CPA had to do an intervention with me. And he said, Joyce, your business is meant to be profitable and you deserve to make an income. You're not running a charity. And so I really had to change my money mindset and realize that yes, I want to be of service to people and maintain that part of my work, but I also need to generate the income to support myself and my family and my business. And once I made those improvements and got those bigger speaking engagements or the bigger clients or more clients, more referrals, better insurance rates, et cetera, I had more money to pay people better. offer more pro bono services. So actually, I was not serving anyone well by not welcoming the income that I was capable of receiving. And by expanding, I actually was able to serve and help far more people. So it's a little bit of a mindset about not wanting to be greedy, not wanting to take away from others, but that really is rooted in scarcity. And then there's also kind of a negative mentality that I notice entrepreneurs really need to move through if they're going to be successful. So I tend to notice that people who are not entrepreneurs see a lot of closed doors. That's not going to work. I tried that, that didn't work. That's not an option for me. I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not good enough. That type of thinking. And entrepreneurs are, again, tenacious and see the way through those doors and continue to look for other possibilities. Like you didn't say, oh, I don't have a college degree, so I can't work at Merrill Lynch. You thought out of the box. You were assertive. You were creative. And so we have to work on those emotional intelligence skills in order to improve our businesses.
Yeah, I remember when I was about 30 and I got asked to speak to a San Diego State business class. And the person who invited me to speak, I said, well, what makes you think I could be valuable? And it was all, well, you've got this real world experience, and you're still going to feel really old in a college classroom with a bunch of they were seniors, so a bunch of 21 and 22-year olds. Said you'll still feel really old, and they'll think you're really old, but it's better you're closer to their age. And so I listened to what they thought I'd get value, why they'd get value, why. And then I said, well, it is important for you to know that, before you invite me to speak to college students, you're probably presuming that I finished college. And I didn't. And it was a
You
funny
you skipped it.
it was a funny pause. Well, I didn't skip all of college, but I skipped finishing. And but it was a funny pause. And I remember that moment thinking, this is fascinating that, a person without a college degree is being invited to speak at a college to college kids. Now, the head of the business department did say, I'd appreciate if you wouldn't lead with the fact that you dropped out of college. And I laughed and I said, look, I have no need to even mention it. If somebody asks me directly, I'll tell the truth. But I think you really hit the nail on the head that there's this what it was for me, and maybe you can comment on this. I just wanted what I wanted, more than whatever the pain was, right? So it was very, very difficult, but I wanted to have money. I wanted to be successful. So that seemed to drive me. That's why we try to use that. What's your vision of your ideal life? Right. So nobody's going to do the work because of what, Bill's vision or Joyce's vision or somebody else's vision. So you have your own vision, and then you have to be willing to just there's so many things that are uncomfortable. I just and I'd be interested in your point of view on this because you have expertise in mental health and therapy. I have a belief that may or may not be true that it's impossible to be successful without doing some stuff that's uncomfortable. And I
Oh,
mean, what do you think of that?
absolutely. Absolutely, Bill. Absolutely. And so it sounds like you have a tremendous amount of drive and ambition and a growth mindset that you're going to do the work. And even if you have a setback or something, you're going to get back up, you're going to continue, you're going to persevere, you're going to continue toward your goals. And so, I think for some of us, that might be an innate, personality characteristic. For some of us, it might be rooted in some trauma. Like, for example, people who grew up in poverty might feel like they never want to experience that again. And so they're going to do everything within their power and control to create the financial peace and stability that they didn't have when they were growing up. And for some of us, it has to do with um, our self-love, again, that knowing that we're deserving of receiving that, because a lot of people feel guilt about receiving success, and some of those are cultural messages, some of them are gender messages. You were talking about the number of millionaires that there are, billionaires that there are, and a far fewer percentage of them are women than there should be based on our population. And so there's something happening in terms of women and our financial literacy and empowerment and knowingness that we're deserving of more. And that's something I'm passionate about as well. So I think we can learn how to develop that, and we can also teach it to our kids and to our mentors or mentees rather, to teach them, that you have to do the work, and to have those goals, and things like sports and other things, activities like that prepare us in life for the dedication and the discipline that it requires. And you mentioned a study around, if we tell people our goals, there's also a study about we're the most like the 5 people that we spend the most time with. And so are we spending time with people who are more complacent than we would like to be? And if so, could we, whether it's in your forum or in some other professional association, find colleagues that are at a similar place, that are movers and shakers, that are going to, inspire you to live bigger and play a bigger game in your business.
You said something also that I think is worth really focusing on. You've said a lot of really good things, but you talked about getting the advice that you separate your charity from your business. So millionaires need financial help too, right? So millionaires aren't less important to help with their money than middle class are. And so they're humans, right? So they're often we end up working with couples, but they could be widowed or divorced or single for a variety of reasons. So this idea, I always find it interesting that people who are some financial advisors, like, I really want to help the middle class. And I kind of go, well, what makes you feel like they're more important? Why is somebody with $500,000 more important than somebody with $5 million?
Isn't that
They
fascinating?
they
So
they
you're
they, they, they also they're humans. No matter what you do, you're helping humans. And then what I recommend advisors do is, separate your business from your charity. So if you really want to help people, then you really should use your charity time to help poor people,
Mhm.
right? So don't work sort of with people who can pay you less. If you're being paid, it's not charity. So charity is actually pro bono. So getting paid less by people who have less money, I just don't believe is more noble. I think it usually has to do with some underlying fear. So if you really want to help people financially, you talked about, with kids and mentees, do financial literacy or financial empowerment training at the local college or university or elementary school or high school. We started a charity in the 90s through the Financial Planning Association called the Foundation for Financial Planning. And millions of dollars in grants have been given through the many millions that have been raised. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of financial planners doing pro bono work. So there are outlets to be charitable, but to cross business and charity. In fact, being charitable is another reason to make a lot of money, because now you have more money above and beyond what you need that you can give to charity. So to
I
me
love it.
it's a framing of that, and I guess that's my way of you. I obviously would not make a very good therapist, but because I just base it when I hear most of this stuff, I just don't buy it. You're good at helping people get through it if there is some fear or limiting belief. And this would be a good segue into, financial advisors are people too, right? So how do you think that their own financial mindsets and beliefs and perhaps limiting beliefs could be affecting not just how they approach building their business, but how they actually serve their clients?
In so many ways. And I'll share a personal example. My own financial advisor he's married to my best friend from college, and I've known him for over 25 years. And I know that Bill came into the profession because his mother died tragically when Bill was a young child, and she had was ill with cancer for many years, and the family was not prepared financially for her health care costs and for losing her income, or she didn't have life insurance, she didn't have long-term care or anything like that in place. And the financial impact, along with the emotional loss of his mom, led him to this career of being a financial advisor. So he has a lot of trauma rooted in his choice of profession. And I think for many of us, we choose our profession based on our earlier life experiences and our roles in our family of origin. And so we want to make that conscious so that we can recognize themes and patterns that we're unconsciously recreating, because that's part of the human condition, and ask ourselves if they're serving us or if they're no longer serving us. Maybe they were a survival coping skill that we had when we needed it. But Bill, for example, I believe has more of a scarcity mindset around money. He's very financially conservative, very focused on saving and decreasing spending, which is a nice balance for me because I'm highly focused on earning and investing and have much higher risk tolerance. So he kind of balances me out. But I think if I didn't have my tendency, a planner with his style might cause clients to have more of a fear-based mentality, scarcity mindset that the money is going to run out, and to not invest in, I'm a VC investor, for example, or in businesses or real estate or other opportunities that could actually really serve them well. So we each have to do our work because we all have blind spots. That's why we all need therapists. My therapist helped me work through my money issues. And so it's part of making us the best professionals that we can be.
Yeah, I think that I don't know whether this would surprise people or not, but when I was a young financial advisor, I was young and a financial advisor and relatively new in the business. I was fortunate that I landed a client, and he was a psychotherapist. His wife was the like the assistant, the liaison to the mayor of San Diego. And so they were both really smart. They were both very, very successful. And his name is Rick. And we're sitting in my office after when we'd finished our meeting. We sort of finished our financial meeting, and I was done being of service to them, which was the purpose of the meeting. And he just leaned back and he smiled. He just kind of got this smile on his face, and he said, "So, Bill, you're obviously a, hardworking, overachiever." He kind of sized me up fairly quickly, right? And he said, "So, what do you do to, have optimal mental health?" And it was a perfect way to frame it for me, because I didn't see myself as someone sort of needing therapy, but I'm supporting your idea that everybody benefits from therapy. And I looked at him and I smiled. I said, "Tell me more about optimal mental health." Right? So he just described, the normal crap that everybody goes through, and then there are tools and techniques to work through those. And I think he probably talked for 10 minutes and responded to a couple of my questions. I just said, "Yeah, sign me up for that."
Awesome.
you know. But I always find it. I'm always disappointed when people believe that getting help, getting therapy is somehow, a negative thing or a sign of weakness. So maybe speak to, there's somebody who's watching this recording who's probably got some walls up about this idea that, therapy is for people who are effed up. I'm not effed up.
Oh,
So
no.
what would you say to someone who is to some degree resistant to this idea that therapy would be a good idea for them?
Well, I always say that I think we all can benefit from therapy and counseling at different points in our lives, and that it should be viewed as a routine and preventative form of healthcare, like going to the dentist or the doctor. So, even having a wellness checkup and having a provider in place for when we're going through different life challenges. The best times to seek therapy are when we're going through some sort of life transition. So people who maybe they ended a job or are starting their business, or they went through a divorce, or they have a new relationship. Those are all life transitions, and life transitions are stressful. So therapy is really effective. And I think a lot of people think about mental health as mental illness. So we think about depression, anxiety, trauma, eating disorders, addiction, etc. But we don't think about the other side of the continuum. So just like physical health, there's disease and there's also wellness. And we spend a lot of money, time, and energy on our physical fitness and wellness, our nutrition, our exercise, our hydration, our moderation of substance use, but we're maybe not paying attention to our emotional, social, and even spiritual wellness. And so, having a counselor or therapist like myself is a safe place to really understand who you are, why you are the way that you are. It increases a lot of self awareness because we all have blind spots and don't see ourselves accurately. And it also provides a place where we can learn practical tools and strategies to change our thinking. So, cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the most empirically supported forms of therapy, and it asserts that our thoughts precede our emotions and behaviors. So, if we have negative and fear based and catastrophic self limiting thinking, by means of self-fulfilling prophecy, that's the way things are going to go for us. And we actually develop neural pathways in our brains that become our default system. And we need to practice CBT techniques to reroute our thinking to more adaptable, effective lines of thinking that are more rooted in problem solving and more positive and optimistic and rooted in that abundance mindset. And so, yeah, therapy can help you with anything from, you know, alleviating mental health conditions to improving your self awareness, your emotional intelligence, which is your ability to understand other people's emotions and navigate relationships. It can help your business. It can help you develop the confidence to do things like write a book or speak on a stage. So, therapy can help. It's like having a personal trainer for your mind and for your relationships.
Mhm. Yeah, I think to me it's a normal part of personal development or professional development. So that's how I viewed it, when I was, 26 years old and really starting to do the work to be successful in a career. It just seems so obvious. It seems so obvious to me, just as obvious as, like, and the only reason anybody's watching this right now is because they signed up for our training, right? So if that's obvious, then getting some kind of something very specific to you, especially if you're. And I'm circling back to something we talked about from the beginning. There are very few people who take our training who are actually doing as much as they intended to do, right? So they intended to take the courses on a faster schedule. They intended to actually use the script to schedule the appointments. They intended to conduct the appointments. One of my mentors calls it the law of diminishing intent, right? So you make a decision and they have a high amount of intention when you make the decision, and then the farther you get away from the actual moment of decision, the intention can tend to diminish, right? So getting some sense of why that might be and altering that. I think one of my least favorite things that people say is something like, "Well, that's just who I am, and that's not going to change." And it kind of reminds me of, I mean, I'm not a parent, so nobody is more qualified to tell people how to be a good parent than somebody like me who does not have kids. But I get it. When someone says, well, these kids, you see people with unruly kids and they're always making excuses about it. Well, these kids don't come with a manual. And I'm like, there are like thousands of books written by God knows how many experts on how to raise children. Right? So there are, who knows how many therapists and experts on, well, your behavior. I love your say, is it serving you? And if it isn't serving you, how do you change it to thoughts and behaviors that do serve you?
Yes,
Right?
absolutely. And so, yeah, we have to do the work. And you mentioned that you started therapy in your mid 20s. So did I. And that's actually my favorite time for a person to start therapy if they haven't before, because it's the time of the quarter life crisis. They're figuring out who we are on a deeper level. And then it's something to go back to again and again. And yeah, that idea, that's just the way I am, or that's just the way my kids are. There's resignation in that, and it's a defense mechanism. It's a way of protecting ourselves from responsibility, or from needing to do something about it. And it's an excuse, frankly. And so there are resources, and it's hard to be a parent. It's humbling to be a parent. I have four adultlings, and they're all in their own unique stages of development. But we have to learn from one another, and we need to ask for help. So yes, therapy and counseling is enormously helpful. So is coaching, or a 12-step group, or some other form of personal development and self-reflection is going to help you succeed.
Yeah, it seems like that's how it's become acceptable at the chief executive, the C-suite, is nobody has a therapist. They all have executive coaches, right? Many of
Well, they have
whom,
therapists too.
right?
I've had
No,
quite a few sitting them
I,
in my
I'm
chair.
just thinking of the volume, though. It kind of exploded where
Yeah,
it's like this badge of honor. I have an executive coach,
totally.
many of whom their background is in therapy, and that's how they became executive coaches, right? So
Yeah, you're looking at one.
I want to cover one more thing, or there's one more thing I think that'll be really valuable for our listeners. At least one more, but this one is top of mind for me. Is you are a legitimate therapist, a licensed clinical professional counselor. You have a specialty in financial therapy, and one of my concerns, and I've noticed this my whole career, is that financial advisors are not qualified to provide therapy.
Yes.
And it's interesting how often they cross that line, right? So it's
Yeah.
often referred to in our business, it's behavioral coaching. And
Yes.
uh, and so where do you think the line is between like a financial advisor and a financial therapist? Where do you think that line is? And I have some follow-up questions to that, but I'm interested in, your thought as a legitimate financial therapist.
Yes, I would agree that any service professional runs the risk of fall, having their boundaries compromised and falling into the role of therapist. And that's not helpful for you or for your clients. And so, behavior coaching, if it's specific about their money behaviors and, spending behaviors or saving behaviors, and it's within your scope of practice and training, an area of expertise, that is perfectly appropriate. But if, for example, you're working with a client who is spending hundreds of dollars on gambling each week, or thousands of dollars, or hundreds of thousands of dollars on their addiction, or you notice that they have compulsive spending, perhaps they're dealing with a bipolar disorder, and people spend a lot of money when they're experiencing a manic or hypomanic state. So anytime that you're seeing some of the common indicators of a mental health condition, symptoms of anxiety like ruminating thoughts, obsessive compulsive behaviors, hypervigilant behaviors. You're noticing that they're having, depression or anxiety or trauma-based symptoms, to normalize therapy and to say, like, oh my gosh, this is so understandable that you're having some of these challenges given your history, and help is available and effective. And seeing a financial therapist is a really nice complement to doing the work that you and I are doing. And if you position it as coming from a place of health, not shaming them, not putting them down in any way, but showing that you have compassion and empathy for them, that you care, that you want to be the bridge to getting them to a real professional who can help them in that emotional area of their life and psychological area.
That was really nice. That was a very elegant way of saying that doing some financial therapy work would be a nice complement to the work that we're doing, right? So to make it clear, this is what I do, and there's some things to be beneficial to you that I either don't do, I choose to not do, or I'm not qualified to do that. It's really the same thing as saying I'm not going to personally be selecting your stocks and bonds in your portfolio. We are going to create an asset allocation and have the professionals manage that, right? So
I love,
I'm not going to personally write your living trusts and wills, but we're going to coordinate with a lawyer who can do that for you, right?
for
So
sure.
we call them outsourced subject matter experts, right? So I'm a big fan of doing things like this, like saying, so here's, in some of the situations that you've described, here's a resource for you, right? So this is, there are, and I would imagine as they go through each of the 12 elements of it, that they might, you tell me, because this is your content, might it be, if they become familiar with the 12 elements, could it be a situational trigger where they might say, and I really think that, this particular chapter, or, fix number 5 is the one that I would recommend you focus on. Can it be that prescriptive?
Yes, I do some coaching of business owners, and I had one coaching client, for example, that based on her family of origin trauma, she had a lot of trust issues, and so she wasn't delegating, she wasn't accessing support, and so I assigned her that chapter and the related exercises that went with it at the start of our work together. So I do think it's a great resource that way as well. It is available on Kindle and audiobook, and I have um, a digital landing page with all of the exercises. So they're downloadable. You can share them with your clients, and it's also available in Spanish.
What's the best way for our members to learn more about the financial mindset fix and other services that you provide?
My website is joycemarter.com. My name is spelled JoyceMarter.com.
Well, Joyce, it's been a pleasure having you with us today to share your wisdom to help our members be more effective at creating their ideal life and building an ideal business with ideal clients. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Well, there you have it, members. Tangible ideas and takeaways to increase the probability that you actually do the work. Your goal of having an ideal business requires to achieve it. Make it a great day.